As I wrap up 1 year of owning and flying my own airplane, I wanted to answer one of the questions that I get most frequently, which is, why did I do it? As a CEO of an 8-figure company, I am almost obsessed with the allocation of my resources, meaning that how do I effectively allocate the time, the capital, and the people that I have access to on a day-to-day basis. And for all intents and purposes, learning how to fly a plane, buying a plane, and then flying your own plane goes completely against all of that. It is not an efficient use of your time. It is not an efficient use of your money, especially with all the options to either fly private or commercial in today's day and age. So the question is, why did I do it? And the answer is very simple: because I didn't want to. Now, let me break that down for you. I was fortunate or unfortunate enough, depending on how you like to view the world, in the past 18 months to have a few people in my life that I knew pretty well pass away at a young age. These were under the age of 30 years old. Now, before you guys go in the comments and say that I'm happy that someone passed away, what I'm saying is that how I perceive the event happening could be a good thing. And it is in this instance, because I decided that I was going to take their lives as lessons as to how fragile life can actually be. I was living my life every single day almost with the assumption that tomorrow was promised, that I was going to wake up tomorrow and do the exact same thing that I did today, that all of the sacrifice, time, energy, effort that I was putting towards my future was going to be worth it when I could cash that check in the future. But the question very quickly became, what happens if there is no future? What happens if you don't have the opportunity to enjoy all of the things that you've been building? And this was really brought home when a few of my close friends passed away, all for a variation of different reasons, but nonetheless, they were young people, they were relatively successful, and they were spending the majority of their life preparing for their future, which I think we all should. But what I realized was that there was a better way to do it. There was a way to find harmony between the sacrificing of today for tomorrow and at the same time enjoying and being grateful for what you have today, regardless of what has happened in the past or tomorrow. And I specifically use the word harmony and not balance because that's what it is. It is blended together. It is harmonious versus balance. Balance is dichotomous. Balance means that there has to be two different ends of a spectrum that you are trying to have even out. Where harmony means that it is not dichotomous. There's no two. It's not a zero-sum game. Both can exist at the exact same time. So what I did was I started to seek out a challenge or an adventure that could be harmonious to my day-to-day lifestyle of being a business owner. And I looked at multiple different options. Probably like you, I spent a lot of time on YouTube. I went on Google, and I wanted to have something that met a few qualifications. The first was that it had to be incredibly challenging. This is kind of counterintuitive to what most people look for when they're looking for their fun activity. But for me, I know myself well enough to know that what I find fun is something that I'm very much challenged by, which is why I love my business and I love my companies, because every single day I go inside of there and I'm consistently challenged, not only with my own company and those problems, but with our clients' companies' problems as well. So I knew that I need to find something that would continuously challenge me, that I would always be a student of, so that I could never become quote unquote a master of it. Just like you'll never become a master of business. There's always things you can learn from. Another great example of this would be an investor, right? You're always learning. You can always be better at investing. The second thing, and this is kind of plays into probably a little bit of my own ego, was that I wanted the group of people that do this activity to be a very small sub-segment of the human population. I wanted to be kind of exclusive. I wanted the barrier to entry to be high because I've already been fortunate enough to build an environment around me where I'm surrounded by, 8 and 9-figure business owners. And I'm really appreciative of that environment because I love learning from these people and I love being around people that are either where I'm at or they are ahead of me. And to run an 8-figure business in the United States, I think it's like 0.04% of the business in the United States are at $10 million a year or more. I wanted the people that understood how big of a challenge this was, because you can typically find a lot of great qualities in other areas of their lives. And I found that in piloting and being a pilot and buying a plane. The people that I meet, I have some of the most interesting and amazing conversations with these people, maybe even more interesting than the conversations I have with the business owners that I'm surrounded with on a day-to-day basis. And the third and final thing that I was looking for was that it could be easily incorporated into my business. My business is a lot of my day-to-day life. My work is my life. And once again, that might trigger a lot of people, but frankly put, I love it. I have a harmony between my, personal life and my business life. So everything that I decide to do, I want to make sure it has that harmony. And so that was the last qualification, was that they could blend together. And another great thing about becoming a pilot, buying your own plane, is that there's huge benefits in your business. First and foremost, I'm not a tax professional, but you can depreciate the purchase of the plane against your active income. So you can write off what you bought for the plane against your business income if your plane is for your business and you're doing business things for it. Second of all is that I can hop over and meet clients, what would typically be a 3 to 5 hour car drive. I can do that in 30 minutes to an hour inside my plane and make it a lot more fun. In addition to that, we shoot some really awesome content, specifically ads, inside of my plane that stands out against all the other ads that you see, because this one's being filmed, like I said, inside of a plane. And so that gets us lower cost per click, lower cost per lead, lower cost per acquisition, et cetera, et cetera. So all of these ways, I have incorporated this plane, this activity into my business, and they're harmonious together. So in February of 2021, I started the journey to get my pilot's license. And like I had suspected, it was a challenging one, but it was a lot of fun. To get your pilot's license, you have to do both ground school and I guess you could call it air school, hours inside the air. And so what I did was, in order to optimize this around my work, I took my ground school in an online ground course, much of the same way that people take online courses for their business or coaching or consulting. I took one for how to fly an airplane, and I bought the course. I went through it, and every single day for 3 months, I would wake up just an hour earlier than I typically do, and I would sit down and I would go through this ground school. It was like being in high school again, but it was a lot more fun. Then you take a ground school test, and I went in there and I passed it the first time that I took it, which was amazing. And then once I was done with that, I went into the real fun part about getting your pilot's license, which is flying a plane. So I found a local airport and a school in my area. It was about 15 minutes from my house, and I'm fortunate enough to have an amazing team and a company that's all online. So what I did was I started to take flying school lessons literally 4 days a week. I would do it Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, every single week. And I did that for almost 3 months. Now, when most people are getting their pilot's license, they do it once every 2 weeks or once every 4 weeks. And so at the very beginning of every single lesson, you're pretty much trying to remember what you did in the last lesson. But because I was doing it just boom, 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 first thing in the morning for 2 hours for almost 3 months, I was breezing through the training of getting my pilot's license. And you have to have around 40 hours to be able to take what's known as your pilot check ride, which is like essentially your final test to become a pilot. That's the minimum you have to have in order to be able to be eligible to take the test. The average person in the United States that passes their test has around 80, I think, like 70 to 80 hours. And because I was going so quickly, and once again, I'm obsessed with how I use my time and efficiency, I ended up getting the entire test and taking it at 40.2 hours. So you couldn't have gotten much closer to what was the minimum in order to take the test. Now, that's not saying that I purposely breezed through the thing and I wasn't being safe at all. It just means that there was a huge benefit of like literally making getting my pilot's license my life for 3 to 4 months and making that my main priority and having that kind of compound on each other as I practice every single day. The check ride was probably one of the most nerve-wracking things I've done since I took like my college LSAT scores to go into law school, and I passed it first time I went through. That was an absolute blast. Even on the check ride, he gave me a few tips and pointers of where I could always learn, because remember, as a pilot, you're always learning, you're always a student. But I officially got my pilot's license, I think in June or July of 2021. And then after that next day, I took my girlfriend up for the first flight that that she'd ever been on with me, and I'm grateful that she trusted me enough to do that. We flew down to the Keys, we had breakfast there, and then we came back again. For the next few weeks, I would rent a plane at my local school. I would go up, I'd fly places, I'd come back down again. But very quickly I realized that renting a plane, although I was grateful for the opportunity, was not the most optimized way to have your own your pilot's license. Because like the freedom of a pilot's license is literally getting up, waking up in the morning and saying, you know what, let's go to the Bahamas today, and then just go into the Bahamas. But when you're renting a plane, you have to go in, you have to talk to somebody, you have to figure out, you have to see if it's available, you got to pay the person, and then you also always run the risk of having the plane, something being wrong with it from the last person using it. And I'm fortunate enough to have a company that spits off a lot of cash, and so I decided just a few months after I got my pilot's license to buy my first plane. And I bought a Piper Cherokee 6. It's a beautiful plane. It's a 6-seater. And I actually ended up buying it in San Diego, California. And then I got a certified flight instructor to fly with me because it's a next version of a plane. It's known as a complex aircraft. So it wasn't like the plane that I trained in. So I needed a special certification to do it. And so I posted on my Instagram saying, is there any flight instructors that would like to fly with me from San Diego to Miami, where I live? And it turns out that someone who had been following me for my company, Scaling with Systems, they were a flight instructor as well, but he had launched a SEO agency and he wanted my help. And so what we did was, instead of me paying him for the flight time, for the being an instructor to take me from San Diego to Miami as I flew the plane, we actually just did a trade. And so just for the total flight time was 18 hours in a small plane that I traveled across the United States. And the whole time I was pretty much just consulting him on his business and how I would adjust it and how I would increase it. And he's seen awesome growth since that call. And I was grateful, or since that flight. And I was grateful that he helped me fly my plane back down there. But that was like one of my first real realizations of how amazing having your pilot's license is, and how amazing it is to fly a small plane across the United States and having like the utmost version of freedom and that's possible in the modern day. Because you can own a plane and have someone pilot it, but if you own a plane and you pilot it, there's like literally nothing stopping you from getting in the plane and taking off and going anywhere you want to go. So we flew across the United States. It was just my certified flight instructor, myself. I was flying the plane. He was just watching me. And then my creative director, Jack, was in the back seat, mostly sleeping the entire time, but he was also shooting some content as well, and flew the plane across the United States. We did it in 3 days, 18.3 hours the total time. And I landed the plane in Miami. And that was in December of 2021. And so now it is January of 2023. So I've had the plane for a little over a year, and I cannot tell you how amazing this experience has been. We have gone on so many adventures that we just wouldn't have gone on previously, and it has allowed me to remove myself from business, but put my mind into a scenario where I was consistently challenged something new. Because I know, even for example, when I go to work out at the gym, I'm at the point in my life at the gym where it's like kind of just it's kind of like maintenance work. Like I call it clocking in. Like I just go there, I work out, I come home, right? I mean, I'm still pushing myself every day and I track everything, but even when I'm there, my brain is always thinking about business, right? It's not engaged 100% in the activity I'm at there. When you're flying a plane, my instructor calls it the most life or death multitasking you'll do in your entire life. And so you have to just be engrossed in the entire activity. Like you have to be paying attention always. What happens if an engine goes out right now? Where would I land? You're talking to people on the radio. You're doing like 15 different things. So you have no option but be totally present where you are right now. And ironically enough, that's the most calming thing I've ever experienced in my entire life. And then you have the benefit of taking your friends and family up in the air, seeing cities from the air versus from the ground. I've had the pleasure of taking people who've lived in cities their entire life and have never gone on a tour around the city. So we've gone on tours around the city in the plane. We've gone at different destinations. I took 5 of my friends, my girlfriend, myself, and 4 of our friends from Miami to Universal for a day trip. We've gone to Universal multiple times. I've gone to Amelia Island before, which there's a private airstrip just on Amelia Island. You can only land a small plane on. Landed there, had the Ritz-Carlton come pick us up, take us to the hotel. It's like world-class experiences, and it's not because it's like so expensive. The plane I bought is only $200,000. It's not like it's a $7 million plane, and the operating costs are like $350 an hour. So yes, it is a little bit more expensive than doing something else, but for example, for me to go from where I live in Miami to my hometown, there's no direct flight. So I have to go up to Atlanta, then back to my hometown in the Panhandle of Florida, and that's like a 5 to 6 hour experience. And I typically fly first class, so each ticket's like $600. I buy one for my girlfriend and I. That's $1,200, and I have to be careful when I leave, what I pack, all that stuff. Where now we leave whenever we want to do. We can put whatever in the plane that we want to, and it costs me, around $1,000, roughly, less than that, $900 one way for both of us. It can be cost effective in a lot of those instances as well, but I made this video mostly because that's the question I get all the time. Like, why did you get your pilot's license? Another question I get is like, do you have to let anybody know when you're flying your plane? And the answer is no, I don't. As long as the weather's fine, you can literally just get up, get in the plane, take off, and go anywhere that you want to go. We've been to the Bahamas, we've been to the Keys, we've been to Naples, we've been to Marco Island, we've been all across the United States for that trip that I went from San Diego to Miami. We've been to Panama City Beach. We've been to Vero Beach. We've been all around Miami to the different little airports in there, and each different one is just like a totally new adventure. And I am very excited. We've kind of played around with the idea of starting an aviation channel for my girlfriend being in charge of it and like running an aviation channel, because I know this community of pilots is amazing. I used to think that the business community was cool and like really close knit until I got into the like pilot aviation community. And this is like, these people are freaking unbelievable. They like love each other. People would just, what typically in a business world someone would pay like $10,000 for this advice, people just give it away for free on Facebook groups in this pilot community. It's just, I always joke that if I ever were to start another business, I would probably start it selling to pilots, because these people are just sickos and how much they love this activity, this experience. And I'm one of them as well. I'm not calling them out. I love it so much also. The final thing I'll address is the safety concern that people always ask. I can tell you that it's definitely not the safest thing that you could ever do, right? Versus a commercial flight, it's multiple times more dangerous than you would if you were to take a commercial flight. Versus like a private commercial flight, it's still multiple times more dangerous. But at the same time, we live in the state of Florida, so the majority of the time when I'm flying across Florida, you can land and there's just like a bunch of farmland and it's a bunch of fields. So if the engine went out, which is like one of the worst things that could happen, the engine stops you in the air, you can land on the field. So it's called an off-airport landing. That happens not frequently, but it does happen, right? But because I live not in mountainous terrains and I don't put myself in bad situations where there's bad weather, it's nighttime, I'm on a mountain and I'm trying to fly the plane, it's a relatively safe experience. I think there's much more dangerous things that people do out there. On top of that, we go across water. We've been to the Bahamas. We're going to go to Turks and Caicos in a little bit. And when you look at that as well, like landing in the water, 90% of water landings have been survived, right? And that's not including just like the warm, calm waters of Southeast Florida or the Gulf of Mexico, where a lot of times it's not like raging swells like the Pacific or the Atlantic Ocean. You could land, and we take all those safety precautions. We have life jackets on. We have emergency beacons. We have things to be able to shatter the windshield and the windows and cut our seatbelts if we need to. So we've taken the majority of the precautions. I do engine out scenarios. I train constantly, but it is definitely not safe. It's not the safest thing you could do, but it is ironically the thing that I do that makes me feel the most alive. And, not in like a cheesy, I'm an adrenaline junkie way, but in, like I said before, in a presence way. And every time I get up there, I just think like, oh my God, I'm literally flying a plane right now. And this is the wildest thing I've ever done in my entire life. So, that all being said, this point of this video was a lot of people asked me about flying, and I've never done a whole video about it that I wanted to create, and now I can just send it to people to let them know. But in addition to that, I wanted to bring awareness to how achievable, both financially and like through yourself, like what you're able to do flying a plane is. I think that my entire the entire pilot training was $10,000 or $12,000, and then the plane was around $200,000, and then I spend, let's just say between hangar and everything else, and using it every single year, I spend around, I don't know, $15,000, $20,000 a year, and that's because I fly it a lot. And I live in South Florida where hangars are very expensive. But, for an activity that you can buy that has this amount of freedom, it is a deal for me. And remember, depending on what you're doing, a lot of it is a write-off, because you can be going on trips to seeing clients or going on trips with clients. Once again, going back to what I talked about in the beginning, my life is so harmonized that some of the people that I spend the most time with also are my clients. And what we talk about the majority of the time is business. So I can take myself and one of my clients went on a trip to Amelia Island a few weeks ago, and the entire time in the plane while we were at the resort, like we were just talking about business, and so that was a write-off because he's a client of mine. We're talking about business. I learned some things, he learned some things, and so like you can kind of make it all work together. If you're running a 9-to-5 job or something like that, maybe it doesn't have as many benefits that it does if you are a business owner, but no matter what, one of the biggest lessons I want you guys to take from here, at least the one that I learned, was that everything doesn't have to have a direct and measurable ROI, right? Especially if you're an entrepreneur, you might be obsessed with efficiency like I am, and instead look at ways that you can harmonize things inside of your life that makes life worth living.